Director Andy Tennant brings us Unit 234, and this one stars Don Johnson, of course, from Miami Vice, and Isabella Fuhrman from The Orphan. Now, this is kind of Die Hard in a storage facility, and a little fact about me, I've actually worked in a storage facility, so I was kind of curious to check this one out. There's been a few horror films based in a storage facility, but this is an action thriller, I guess you would say. And the story takes place one lonely weekend in a storage facility. Isabella Fuhrman's character actually owns this facility and she's working there. She's the only employee working in this particular time. And there is a situation where she ends up finding an unconscious man strapped to a kind of gurney in one of the storage units. And he's actually been put there as a kind of part of a criminal scheme, you might say. And Don Johnson and his kind of lackeys basically want this guy for purposes that will become clear. And Isabella Fuhrman's character basically sort of stumbles upon him first, and he appears to have been operated on recently. And obviously, she makes the assumption that he's obviously been a victim in kind of human organ harvesting. So she obviously tries to kind of defend him as these kind of gang of, you know, criminal types end up wanting to lock this place down, want this guy for herself, or basically want to keep Isabella Fuhrman's character off the case. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what works in this movie's favour. You know, it's a relatively sort of simple premise. As I say, it's kind of a Die Hard clone in sort of some ways. Again, having worked for a storage facility, they can be quite lonely places. This one in particular looks like it's taking place in sort of a somewhat of a rural area. And there was a couple of things here that I can tell you that, you know, that are true about working in a storage facility, and maybe those aren't necessarily. For example, when Don Johnson's character comes in and tries to use subterfuge to basically get access to a particular unit, claiming to be the person who's got the account, but obviously Isabella Fuhrman can see in the account there's a photo of this other guy, and you know, and therefore it kind of sparks her, well, you know, this doesn't seem quite right here. So there's some sort of some elements of the security protocols and stuff that ring quite true. There are some stuff which doesn't, but we'll come on to that. One thing I did like about this movie is the kind of the group of people. I think there's 5 Don Johnson and kind of 4 lackeys. They are a morally complex bunch, and that makes them for quite interesting kind of antagonists. So as the film goes on, obviously we learn that at least some of them have somewhat of a moral boundary, and it's interesting to kind of see that dichotomy unfold as the kind of the film goes on. And you know, we have our Isabella Fuhrman's character, basically our protagonist, trying to defend this guy who's wounded, to try and kind of get him to safety, using what you can to try and you know, escape from this kind of storage facility, using all these kind of stuff that is typically maybe in you know, a storage facility. It's not a particularly action-packed movie, but nonetheless I was still quite engaged, because I felt like, you know, they did a good job of kind of cutting her off. They cut the kind of the power and the kind of the phone lines and stuff. A phone is smashed. You can't really, you know, call for help or anything kind of like that. And it is quite a kind of out of the way place. So they do a good job of having a sense of what you're gonna do. It's kind of like you are in a very kind of like rural area. It's in the night, 24-hour storage facilities. There's kind of like you know, not particularly a lot of people likely to come by. So I did think it had some kind of like some quite interesting kind of elements here that made for an engaging story, even though I wouldn't say this is like as action packed as like, you know, Die Hard or Under Siege or anything like kind of like that. It still has an element here of engagement and sort of like a tense kind of you know, atmosphere, I think, which does make it sort of engaging for the most part. I think Furman is very good in this role. I think Don Johnson's pretty good in this role. Again, you know, having somewhat of a kind of a morally complex kind of antagonist makes the kind of an interesting sort of character at the very least. I don't think they quite nailed it, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty interesting. And it's, you know, I have to say, it looks like it was kind of shot in a, or at least partially shot in an actual storage facility. What doesn't work, I mean, like, there are some things here. I mean, I've worked in the UK version, so I don't know if it's different in America, but there's this thing, she has like a skeleton key that they can get into in anyone's unit. I don't think that would happen because there's nothing stopping you from helping yourself to people's units. So I don't really think people would have a skeleton key, plus people will have a variety of different locks. You know, you're not going to be able to get into every lock, are you? I mean, that might be a small thing, and it might be a big case of, because I've worked there, people might not think about that, but, you know, it is what it is, I guess. What didn't work maybe legitimately with the film, rather than me picking at kind of holes in regards to the legitimacies of working in a storage facility, I would say there's kind of, the kind of moral complexity that it tries to kind of show on Don Johnson's character and his crew is interesting, but I don't think it's fully fleshed out, because there are some decisions here that seem very sort of, when you've seen the film and you understand characters' motivations and stuff, you question, you know, what you've seen in regards to, would that have really happened? It's hard to explain without spoiling anything, to be honest with you, but it was still like, you question, when we have a character who's morally grey, and we're meant to feel like some type of like a way about, say, Don Johnson's character, because he, you know, he does show like he's not a complete monster, but at the same time we see he's been quite cold-blooded as well, you know, and quite brutal. And I think the movie sort of forgets that in a way, if I'm honest. And then we have kind of like the final sort of scenes of the movie where, you know, the explosive finale happens. I was like, this has now got a little bit silly. I kind of guessed where the movie was going, to be honest with you, because the way the dialogue is kind of in the movie, people kind of stop at a certain point, and you're thinking, well, that seems like an odd place to stop this dialogue, that like you're about to kind of like say something but you don't for whatever reason, and it's kind of like that's really only to further the plot. So I kind of guessed more or less what would have happened. And also I think there's a character's motivation. It kind of comes out of nowhere to have a big explosive finale. Had this been more of a grounded movie, you would have thought a character would have, you know, made different choices. Let me just kind of say this. We get this big sort of finale and stuff, and thinking, why would this character do that? You know, it doesn't really seem... a character could have made better choices and probably end up better for him, even though it wouldn't have been particularly kind of cinematic. That's all I'm going to give on that one. So it's a kind of a fun sort of time wastery kind of Die Hard sort of clone. It's not particularly smart, I don't think. It has elements where I think it's entertaining and good enough, if you don't mind, a kind of like a Die Hard clone, a modern Die Hard clone. Die Hard in a storage centre. But it's not, I don't think, a particularly smart film. I will give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.